All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Supporting Mental Health Through Play. This is part one of our two-part series. I'm so excited to welcome Sahar Wahidi and Jackie Kilcary, who are here from TTAC at George Mason, which is a training and technical assistance center at George Mason University. And we are so excited to have them here with us, and I'm going to turn it over to them.
All right. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We're really excited to spend some time chatting with you all about the value behind supporting mental health through play. Just like Mary Beth mentioned, this is a part one of a two-part series. So today we're really going to focus a lot of our time talking about what play is, specifically unstructured play, but also how unstructured play feeds into building our children's executive functioning skills and how that then leads them towards supporting their mental health. And finally, we're going to go ahead and share some tips on how you can incorporate that into your everyday activities. All right. So Jackie, I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself first.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jackie Kilcary. I am one of the early childhood coordinators at the TTAC at JMU. I previously have taught Head Start. I was also the inclusion learning disabilities teacher in a kindergarten classroom. So I've been throughout early childhood in both typically developing and neurodivergent students, and throughout both classrooms I had every kind of student. I'm also a mom of 4 children ranging in age from 1 to 8 currently. And so I have been through all of this myself, both as a teacher in the classroom supporting unstructured play and also as a parent at home. So I look forward to sharing my knowledge with you and gaining your knowledge as well when you ask us questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Jackie. And my name is Sahar Wahidi. I am a third-year PhD student at George Mason studying educational psychology, but really focusing in the field of early childhood special education, focusing on supporting our educators' self-regulation and also thinking about those interdisciplinary approaches in research methods and how that leads to practice. But prior to my PhD and working with TTAC, I was a site director for therapeutic recreational services in Fairfax County. And I've worked in a day home setting as well as a K through 12 sub in FCPS and a K through 12 learning disabilities tutor. So again, I'm really excited to have the opportunity to learn with you all today. Okay, so here are some objectives for the day. Our goal and our hope is really for you all to be leaving this time understanding and being able to describe what unstructured play is. But also understanding the benefits of unstructured play and the power it has in creating opportunities to build executive functioning skills and supporting our children's mental health. And then, of course, identifying ways of incorporating unstructured play throughout a child's day. So we really want to start off our session kind of getting us into the mindset of this idea of play. And so I want us to spend a little bit of time reflecting on what some of your childhood play experiences were. And once you spend some time doing that, take another couple of seconds to think about what are some of your own children's play experiences. Do you see any similarities, any differences? So let's just take a couple of minutes of silence here. And when you all get a moment, if you feel comfortable, go ahead and share some of your thoughts in the chat. All right, so Mary Beth, if you don't mind, do we have anything in the chat?
I don't see anything at this point, but please do. I will let you all know if I start to see something, but
Awesome.
Oh, here we go. So playing outside, learning through the real world. Another person said, I spend a lot of time dressing up and playing with stuffed animals. And someone just talked about kind of free play versus technology.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Role playing is huge. You know, we spend a lot of time in our unstructured play as children, and we see this also as a similarity from how we might have grown up engaging in unstructured play and how our children are experiencing it today. Technology, you know, that's something that we're all still trying to figure out how to find balance in our everyday lives. And it certainly is something that is really encompassing a lot of the time that children spend in their everyday activities and routines. So we're not really going to touch up a lot about technology in our session today, but we could also put in some resources for you all that maybe talk about how to balance that in your everyday routines. But these are some really, really great examples. And so what I really want to challenge everyone in doing is keeping these reflective thoughts. And it's okay if you didn't share, totally okay. But keep those reflective thoughts in mind as we move through the rest of our content. Okay. So with keeping our reflections in mind, we also ask you all to think about your children's play experiences and how it compares to your own. What we really see is that there are both similarities and differences. However, one thing that has really been brought to light in play research is that children are given less and less opportunities to engage in those play experiences. Peter Gray, who is a professor at Boston College, primarily focuses on children using play as a natural means for self-directed learning. Released a statement on how play has changed, stating that over the past 6 years, we have witnessed in our culture a continuous, gradual, but ultimately dramatic decline in children's opportunities to play freely without adult control, and especially in their opportunities to play in risky ways. So over the same 60 years, we have also witnessed a continuous, gradual, but ultimately dramatic increase in all sorts of childhood mental disorders, especially emotional disorders. So in a moment, we're going to ask you all to use the chat feature again, but let's just take a moment to let that statement sink in. Now, what I want you all to think about is what are some key words that you've noticed in this quote? And go ahead and flood the chat with those key words. So Mary Beth, is there anything in the chat about those keywords that some of our folks might have noticed?
Okay, so risky, play freely, emotional disorders, control, decline, adult control, opportunities.
Yep.
Dramatic,
Yeah.
emotional, yeah, risk again, yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of profound language in this statement, a lot of things that really get you thinking. And some of the things that, you know, we notice is that a lot of play that we see is structured through extracurricular activities. And so that's when we're thinking about like playing freely without adult control, that's kind of what we're thinking about. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what that means later on in the presentation. But the word risky comes up a lot. And when we think about unstructured play, some of the things that really come to mind is, you know, the potential to lead to injuries. And so that right there can lead to a huge constraint in terms of what opportunities we allow children to have in those moments. And something that we'll kind of thread throughout our presentation is that when we're talking about unstructured play specifically, that doesn't necessarily mean unsupervised play. So we'll dig into that in just a little bit. But it's also really important for us to think about, you know, the long-term benefits of providing play opportunities for kids to really explore the world around them. And a lot of the time, those play environments are really naturally built into those everyday spaces. And so I really want us to take a moment to hone in a little bit on that second half of the quote that talks about how ultimately we really have seen this dramatic, so again, that word dramatic that's popped up a few times, increase in childhood mental and emotional disorders. And to put into that perspective, or put us into that perspective, the CDC has put out that 1 in every 6 children has been diagnosed with some sort of mental, behavioral, or developmental disorder. And so, what that really tells us is we're missing something here. And that one part that we're missing could essentially be this idea of play, and more specifically, unstructured play. So before we dig deeper, I think it's really important for us to establish, what is play? I feel like when we say the word play, we very much clearly have an idea of what happens during that time. But really breaking play down to understanding what it entails and what that really translates to at a deeper level can help us intentionally and meaningfully apply play in our everyday circumstances. On our slide, I've got a quote from PJ, who was a child developmental psychologist who focused on the idea of how children constructed their mental world. And so what he said is that play is the answer to how anything new comes about. And when you teach a child something, you take away forever their chance of discovering it for themselves. And what this is really kind of digging into here is this idea that play is learning, but also learning through exploration. Therefore, when a child is playing, when they're really doing something that they're enjoying and they're invested in what they're doing, this really opens up the opportunities for them to push those boundaries and explore their emotions and discover new things about the world around them. And so by thinking about play as this concept of exploration, young children really learn about the world around them, but then also about themselves. But play also is not just this one-dimensional definition. If you all remember from Peter Gray's quote, he discussed how children are unable to play freely without adult control. That being said, there are two forms of play. We have structured play, which is usually organized by the adult in the room. So it's adult-led. And that usually pertains like having some kind of goal or purpose to the activity. But then there's unstructured play. And that's the play that Peter Gray was referring to when he referenced children playing freely. So for today, we're really going to primarily focus on unstructured play. So unstructured play is play that is child-led, meaning that the child gets to decide what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. There really is no preset organization or planning that goes into that play, and there's absolutely no predetermined goals that are set. Basically, it really is whatever spontaneously comes up in that moment. And these moments, as we know, are moments where we are letting kids just be kids. Unstructured play is the child's decision and choice. Now, earlier I mentioned that does not mean that unstructured play is unsupervised. Whether you are invited into the play by the child or observing from afar, there's no guideline saying that you as the adult shouldn't be there. And Jackie, I know, will touch up on this a few times later in the discussion as well. But what is important to get at is how children grow to regulate themselves through play. So regulate themselves physically, emotionally, mentally, and socially. And all of that can occur through unstructured play opportunities and really creating those moments where they can embrace self-calculated risks, allowing them and giving them that opportunity to develop self-control in order to achieve their set goals. Now, all that being said, what's really the science behind unstructured play? As we're experiencing the world, and I say we because it really could pertain to both children and adults, but as we experience the world, we are almost automatically and naturally adapting to new experiences. From the first time we engage in tummy time and feeling that pressure on our tummy or to even like trying new foods and smelling something new for the first time. All of these moments lead to learning new information and creating those memories. But when we're thinking about a young child, they haven't really experienced much. So for them, almost every experience is a huge burst of opportunities for these neuronal connections to be made. Now, a neuronal connection are essentially the way that the brain circuits itself. So it's the circuit system of the brain. And when those connections are being made, they are set to then interpret the world and the inputs being received from their surroundings. According to the the Center on Developing Child at Harvard, in the first few years of life, over 1 million neuronal connections are formed every second. And because of all of these new connections in the brain, different facets of development can occur. So again, thinking back on the physical, the social-emotional, the cognitive, these capacities really emerge in these early years. And so how they emerge through those connections that are made, through play, that really sets that kind of prerequisite for success into adulthood. So now that we know the difference between structured and unstructured play, and we've talked a little bit about the science behind play, let's talk about those overall benefits. Many of these have probably been lightly touched on, but first and foremost, it is really important to emphasize on this idea that, the most important period of human development occurs in this birth to 8-year time frame, so early childhood. And it's really because that during these years, the brain is really so equipped to take in all of this new information that's in the child's environment and creating those neuronal connections that we talked about, that really helps them hone into these like cognitive skills, into the emotional well-being skills and social competence as well. So the first point that we have here is that play is truly that natural learning environment that opens up the opportunity for young children to explore and develop by doing and talking, and also learning how to think as well. It's these moments where they get to explore new ideas and they get to see the world from their perspective. Unstructured play also is important in the development of problem-solving skills. So really opening up those opportunities where they can self-direct themselves through coping strategies and how to deal with stress and other life skills or life challenges. They get to almost do like a trial and error of their experiences during this time. We also see the development of social skills. So compromising, sharing, working through conflict resolution, all of this also really helps them build empathy as well and trying to see things from the other person or the other child's perspective and lens. Unstructured play also encourages creativity and imagination, and these are skills that can benefit an individual into adulthood. And then we've also got developing fine motor and growth skills. A very common phrase that we hear in early childhood is this idea that we learn to move, but then you also have to move to learn. And again, this really ties back to the science of play and how every single moment is a moment for a new brain circuit connection. But if we're not moving, if we're not trying new things, if we're not playing, then we may not have those opportunities to make those much needed connections. The next one I'll touch up on a little bit more detail later, but unstructured play also provides a safe place to learn while children can really manage their emotions and express those big feelings like anger and frustration. This really also opens up the opportunity for them to understand what is happening. And not only that, but take those risks and engage in risk assessments, but in a safe way. Going back to like exploring their emotions though, they can also use this opportunity to reenact those experiences that they've had where they may not fully understand what is going on. And so through play, they can then work through those feelings and understand those feelings on their own. Sometimes what we will also see is children will project their emotions onto an inanimate object, so like a toy or a stuffed animal. And what they do is through the interactions with that stuffed animal or a toy, they'll try to problem solve and explore healthy ways to process what they are feeling. So using unstructured play in this manner is actually a very strong therapeutic technique that a lot of child psychologists will engage with, therapy through play. And it's again through this idea of providing that safe space to learn and grow. And finally, we have supporting the executive functioning skills, which also includes developing problem-solving skills and learning. But a lot of what happens during play is child-led. And so these opportunities give children the feeling of control. And when they are in this mode of being in control, they themselves are learning how to work out what they're thinking and how to respond to their world. So to follow, we can also think of the benefits of unstructured play through the different types of unstructured play that we might see in our everyday lives. According to the American Psychological Association, there's actually 3 different types of play. There's active play, interactive play, and creative play. So active play is what we primarily think about in terms of physical play, focusing on those like fine and gross motor skills. But here we can also see a lot of health benefits. So an increase in energy, a reduction in anxiety and tension through like the release of those happy hormones like dopamine and endorphins, but then also again, opening up that opportunity for decision-making, risk assessment, and managing our emotions. During interactive play, this is when we see that social emotional piece where children are able to develop their empathy and even foster connection and acceptance. By being able to interact with others and play with others, children really do feel that they are accepted as who they are, and that builds into their self-concept and their self-esteem. And finally, creative play. And only, a lot of creative play does tie into cognitive development because it's really a lot about sense making of the world, but sense making through art, music, telling stories. Creative play also gives them the opportunity to try different identities and to explore learning from a different perspective. Okay. So now we're going to switch gears and talk a little bit about how executive functioning and how unstructured play supports that, but also how a lot of unstructured play is tied into building mental health supports. It can almost be seen that unstructured play feeds 2 birds, so executive functioning and mental health, with 1 bird feeder. So first of all, what exactly is executive functioning? I know I've thrown that word out a couple of times. But executive function is really the part of the brain that controls processes that regulate our thoughts and actions through our behavior. What that looks like is goal-directed behavior, problem solving, decision-making, and planning. So, for example, say some children are playing together in a center and have collectively decided to create their own grocery store because it is something that they are leading. So it's child-led. We can consider this unstructured play. But in order for them to run this store, they need to think through issues such as, who's going to play the cashier? Who's going to be the shopper? What produce are they going to have? All of these decisions that they are making require problem-solving skills, decision-making, and planning. And also a little bit of goal-directed behavior by the shoppers themselves. What is their food goal or their dinner goal? What choices do they have to make at the store to make that dish? So all of these tie into executive functioning skills. And so, the power of unstructured play and executive functioning is something that's also been extensively researched. And I really wanted to bring forth this article by Barker and colleagues from 2014, where they did a study where they asked parents to observe and take note of how their children, who are ages 6 through 7, played. And after the observations, the researchers ended up assessing children's self-directed functioning using some kind of verbal task. And what they really found was that children who spent more time in less structured activities actually displayed better self-directed control. And this was even after they had controlled for age, verbal ability, and even household income. And so what this really tells us is the power of unstructured play in creating these opportunities to build these executive functioning skills. And so, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of executive function skills are also needed to help build that support for mental health. And so we've touched up on a lot of these ideas throughout the presentation already, but I also really wanted to talk about the mental benefits associated with unstructured play. According to the Canadian Public Health Association, unstructured play is actually recognized as a child's right and a critical component to overall health and well-being. And so when thinking about things like mental health, emotional health, play really is there to support the development of positive self-concept and self-esteem. Thinking back to how children try to push the boundaries when they play, because they're given that autonomy and that freedom, and that they're pushing these boundaries, if they succeed in whatever goal they set themselves, that right there is a huge boost of self-esteem and improvement of their own self-concept. But unstructured play also creates an opportunity to build friendships. We're really focusing on that social emotional aspect. When you play with your friends, you create those connections during these times, and it opens up opportunities for young children to practice role playing, which I know some of you mentioned in the chat earlier in our activity that we did. And this opens up the opportunities for children to understand their own emotions, and it creates a safe space for them to practice those big feelings and think about how they can go about overcoming that challenge. And then, of course, thinking about your physical play, we talked about it with the different types of play and how during play activities and play times, there is a release of those happy hormones. And research also shows that exercise and physical activity release those same hormones. So when children engage in physical play, those happy hormones get released. And so that right there also decreases their anxiety and depressive symptoms. And then on the other note, also thinking about, what that means in the long run for children. Engaging in play gives them the opportunity to develop resilience through making sense of their world. So along with those risk management skills that I've brought up a few times, these safe spaces to navigate uncertainty and challenging situations can also help them develop healthy coping skills. And finally, unstructured play also gives the opportunity to improve a child's ability to manage adversity through challenging and pushing the boundaries, role playing, and taking the time to make sense of their world in a way that makes sense for them. So I know I've thrown a lot of information at you all. So thank you for bearing with me. We're going to take some time now to pause, and if there are any questions from the audience, we can definitely address them now before moving on to Jackie, who will talk to you all about how, you can incorporate unstructured play in your everyday routines.
Right, so I would encourage everyone, if you do have a question for Sahar, please go ahead and put that in the chat. We didn't have anything so far, but let's take a moment. And all right, so we have our first question. How do we support children ages 4 to 5 years who are not yet able to use risk assessment for playmates? They don't realize how his reactions impact others, like bumps, crashes, hits.
Yeah, that's a great question. When we're thinking about unstructured play at like early ages, it's really them pushing those boundaries and trying to figure out like, how far can I really go? And going back to something that we're going to mention like throughout this presentation, unstructured play doesn't necessarily mean unsupervised play. So of course, when it gets to that point where, safety is being jeopardized, you as the adult should intervene and really take this moment as a moment to engage in conversation and learning about what it means, how our actions impact others. And this not only is going to help them, grow as individuals, but it also gives them an opportunity to practice empathy as well. And so our hope is that the next time around when they do engage in unstructured play, that we'll see kind of that role playing, we'll see kind of that idea of them like, sharing and interacting with each other and in a way that they are really understanding the perspective of the other child.
All
Hopefully
right.
that
So,
answers your question.
Sahar, thank you. So another parent is asking, is it too late to incorporate this in children that are older, like ages 8 and 10?
Of course not. It's never too late to play. Even as adults, and I'm hoping that we spend some time with self-care, and a lot of that self-care could include engaging in leisurely activity. And so anytime that an individual is put in a place where they are able to do something that they truly enjoy, that is unstructured, that is led by them, it really gives them the opportunity to experience all of these benefits. So this is something that occurs, not just in early child, but really should be occurring throughout life. Executive functioning skills, mental health support, that doesn't stop at a young age. That's something that, I truly believe should be incorporated and emphasized like throughout our whole lifetime.
Great, thank you. So another question, how do we implement unstructured play in a setting where parents are paying for a program? I've attempted this in the past, but I'm always questioned about why the kids are doing, in quotes, nothing.
Good question. Um,
Sahar, I'd like to take that one if you don't mind.
Go
So
for it.
some of this we will get to in the next half of the presentation, in terms of how both childcare providers, teachers, and parents can participate in play and kind of engage in the play with the children that is child-led, but also has some integrated concepts, whether that's academic or social, emotional, turn-taking, things like that, how the adult can participate without leading. So if you'd like to hold that question until the very end, we'll see if we get to it, if that's all right.
Okay, thank you. So another quick question. How do we encourage a child to engage in unstructured play when the child seems to always want direction from an adult? Or the child prefers not to play on their, play on their own.
That is coming next as well.
Okay, perfect. All right. Awesome.
Love it. Great
So they're already thinking ahead. That's awesome.
Excellent.
All right. So this is a question. This is really around for school age children. And how do you think the few opportunities for unstructured play during the school day is affecting our kids like 5 through 8? How can we maybe better address that they only have a half hour of recess at school? Is there other ways to maybe address this in the school day?
Good question. Jackie, are you going to be touching up on this, or is it safe to go ahead and answer?
Go ahead and answer, and then I can add. Go ahead.
Awesome. So I think what's also really important to remember is that unstructured play is going to look different at different stages of life. So what unstructured play might look like in early childhood could be very different than what it looks like in school age, very different in middle school and high school, and very different into adulthood. And I think because it is child-led, there are ways to incorporate exploratory learning opportunities for children throughout the school day. And so it really may not necessarily be labeled as play, but because they're given the opportunity to explore and learn through exploration, it also opens up opportunity for children to really develop that intrinsic motivation for learning, that intrinsic motivation to, want to grow and succeed in whatever the subject matter is at that time period. So it may not look the same as an early childhood, but there are ways to incorporate it throughout the school day academically outside of just that recess time.
No, that's great. Wow. And it's a wonderful way to think about it. As you said, Sahar, that it doesn't necessarily look the same. And so that's great perspective. And one last question. How can we establish unstructured play? So a mom is talking about her 9 and 3-year-old, and the 9-year-old always wants to tell the 3-year-old what to do. How might maybe this mom have some kind of guidance for that play with her 2 children?
Good question. Well, a lot of really good questions all around. But where my mind is really going with this is, let's think about it from the perspective of that 9-year-old. Why do we think that they're, giving these directions to their 3-year-old sibling? And it really could be that the 9-year-old is engaging in role playing. They're really trying to engage in that idea of a caregiver. So as an adult, what you can really do is kind of let that naturally happen and see where it goes. They could go into a situation where they are engaging in unstructured play and playing house, where the 9-year-old is the caregiver and the 3-year-old is the child. So, Jackie, I'm not sure if you have anything to add to this, because I feel like this is something that you might touch up on more so in your half of the presentation.
I probably will, but I think following through with what you just said, Sahar, observing that play and seeing how that 3-year-old is also receiving those directions. If the 3-year-old's participating in this play as if they're enjoying it, then I think it's perfectly fine that the 9 and the 3-year-old are playing together, as long as it's child-led and they're both engaging together. So it's not the 9-year-old telling the 3-year-old and then the 3-year-old just has to follow orders. Or if she seems upset, then I certainly think it's an opportunity for you to step in and say, let's see what sister wants to do now. So I think that we'll touch on this in terms of the adult and observing and knowing when to step in. So we can also circle back to this one if we did not quite get to that.
Okay. And do you guys have a minute for one more question before we move on?
I think so. Yes.
Okay.
Sure, yeah.
All right. So, so how do you suggest navigating, supporting social emotional growth, as well as and well-being in our day and age where information is available too easily, and even our young children, our young students, kind of causes stress for adults. Person's also observing that there seems to be a lot more bullying happening in kindergarten. How could teachers maybe address everyone's feelings in a feasible way that of course that they can still also teach? Stating here that feelings are important and we don't want to ignore them.
Yeah. So what really comes to my mind with this question is thinking about the intentionality and meaningful piece of unstructured play. And what this could look like is having explicit conversations with the children as a whole group about what play could look like, where all of us are working together and all of us are really enjoying this safe space that we're creating collectively as a group. Because, when kids may not necessarily understand let me rephrase really quick. Sometimes when we tell a child something, they may not fully understand exactly what we're telling them. And so we need to work on being a little bit more explicit in the language that we use and how we approach these situations. So really taking every opportunity as an intentional and a meaningful opportunity to talk about social emotional concepts can really help children understand it in a way that is directly tied into the now moment. So really looking at those like context specific experiences that are in the moment throughout the day. I hope that answers the question, but Jackie, do you have anything to kind of feed into that?
I think the only thing to add is that kindergarten teachers have a very, very heavy load teaching academics and social emotional skills. At a 5-6-year-old age, we really still need to focus on teaching those skills and allowing this play to happen in the school day, and then addressing those social emotional needs through the play. I think one way that teachers can facilitate this is in role playing outside of problems. And again, I'll touch on this in a little bit, but meaning, of course, you're going to problem solve in the moment as well. But when everyone is not escalated in their problem, when they are de-escalated and calm, and at the end of the day, maybe, or the morning meeting circle time, this is the time to address and to role play some of those. I know someone used the word bullying. I imagine it's, some kind of taking of a toy or name calling or things like that. This is the moment when everyone's de-escalated, to have those conversations, to role play it, and to have the children, those 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, problem solve, come up with some solutions, maybe even some key phrases that as a classroom community we're going to use. So when I feel unsafe, I'm going to say, insert the phrase that the kids come up with. So I really applaud our early childhood educators, because it is a very heavy task to both be teaching academic skills and also really trying to strengthen those social emotional needs of the students. So with that being said, I think it's a great moment to move on to some of the how am I going to do this? So for those that jumped in late, I was both a Head Start teacher and then the learning disabilities teacher in a kindergarten inclusive classroom. And now I am a parent of 4 children ranging in age from 1 to 8. So I have experience in both the classroom and as a parent at home with my own children. And let me tell you, those are 2 different things, but both experiences have really fed into how I support children and what I think parents and educators need. So you might be saying, I love this idea of unstructured play. It sounds wonderful, but it's impossible. My children want me near them all the time. They want me to play with them all the time. And I think we had one of those questions in the chat. So we knew this was coming. So how do you know how to pull back from what I would say co-playing and then start to teach them independent play, unstructured play? So first and foremost, I just want to start by saying that your child has to be in a safe place that's appropriate for him or her to play by himself. So again, it doesn't mean unsupervised. So for instance, in my house from the kitchen, I can also see the living room, and there's no unsafe items in that living room space. So if I walk over to the kitchen to wash the dishes, get a cup of coffee and come sit back down, I know that my children are going to be safe. So that's first and foremost, is make your child's place a safe place to be. Now, to play independently successfully for a prolonged amount of time, your child has to be challenged and engaged by their materials. So open-ended toys, you may have heard this phrase, educators and parents, mean that they do not have one single purpose. So an example of this would be a housekeeping area in the classroom, or if at home you have like one of those small little play kitchens. It's very open-ended. The child could be pretending it's a grocery store. They could pretend that they are cooking for their family. So there's lots of different ways that they can engage. They could be the mom, they could be the dad, they could be the child, it could be the grocery store. So lots of different ways to engage in that play. So we're going to use this chat feature once again. And I just want you to take a moment to think about some of your children's favorite items, either in the classroom or at home. And then I want you to just brainstorm if they are open-ended or closed or not open-ended. And then I'd like you to use the chat feature if you feel comfortable to tell us this open-ended item that's in your home or in your classroom that you find children love to play with. So when you're ready, you can type that. Whoa, just flying into the chat there. Great.
All right, so flashlight,
Love it.
Legos, magnet tile, a baby doll, flags, blocks, rainbow counting bears, paint, kitchen areas popular, open-ended and dramatic play, sensory tiles, cars, boxes, and tape. I like that one.
Really great answers.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Lovely. So you guys actually came up with many on my list. Of course, as a mom of an 8-year-old boy, Legos reach the top of the list in my house. But also magnet tiles are huge here. I'd also like to think about things like little toy animals, puppets, a train set. Someone said baby doll. I love that. Play-Doh. So a little bit of sensory as well, and that fine motor, a sandbox, any kind of arts and crafts activities, glue and pom-poms and stickers, things like that. And then someone did mention some, what I would call non-toy, that you wouldn't think are typical toys. Boxes and tape is a wonderful example of an open-ended item that is a non-toy. Pots and pans, toilet paper rolls. Someone said a flashlight, which I also love. I mean, give a kid a flashlight in a dark room and they could go crazy. So wonderful ideas. I also just wanted to touch on outdoor. So think about outdoor, some open-ended items. So they might not look like toys that are outdoors. For my boys, I have the two oldest are boys. Sticks, rocks, even trees are items that they use in their play. So if you really start to open your mind to what can be an open-ended item for your child, you really start to see the world in a different light. So, and I imagine that some of these things that people said, Legos, magnet tiles, flashlights, dramatic play, those are the items that then facilitate a prolonged playtime. So think once you're getting yourself set up to do this unstructured play, really think about your space and make sure that there's some open-ended items there. So Harvey, you click for me. We had a question from our participants. As you registered, you had the opportunity to add a question. And one of the questions was, how do I encourage unstructured play when kids switch to, I'm bored anytime screens aren't involved? I have been here. So touching on this just slightly in terms of technology. I was a young mom at the time, and I had an older veteran mom tell me that you need to use technology to your advantage. So for instance, I really had a hard time preparing dinner because there were two little kids at my feet at all the time. This was the moment that I needed to know that they were in a safe place and were able to do something that I knew they were safe doing. So for me, that was my 20, 30 minutes of screen time in the day for them. So I chose the time that fit my schedule best, that I needed help with. And that's when they got their screen time. So I don't want to say as a parent that you cannot do any screens, you cannot have any technology. That is not realistic in this world that we live in. So I am just asking that you use your screen time wisely. You limit it, but you use it wisely in a way that's best for you, your schedule, and your child. Next slide, please, Sahar. And then talking a little bit about the whole I'm bored thing. I have been here at the time, my kids were 5 and 7. It was over the summer. I kept hearing it and I decided, you know what, I'm going to create this and I'm going to put it on the refrigerator. So you'll notice that at the top, I say, what have I done today? Now, my 5-year-old cannot read at the time, and my 7-year-old is a very strong reader, so he could read some of these. But notice my headings at the top are open-ended. Built, imagined, created, read, played outside, helped. So at no point do I say, did you do Play-Doh today? Did you do Legos today? I try to give them options that I know I have in my house that they can see the image of and go and find very easily themselves. So all of these images, I just Google searched, I stuck into the column, and then I moved on and printed it. It took me all of about 5 to 10 minutes. So you would choose items that fit for you. Now, again, it doesn't mean that they have to do blocks. It just gives their brain a moment to think, what can I build with? Oh, I could build with blocks, or I could build with that empty box outside. So you really leave it open-ended for them to think about their play. Now, I have all these columns, and you'll notice that helped is one of the choices. I've actually never gotten to the point where they get to, I'm so bored and I've done all these things and I want to help you. But if they did, that would mean they get to clean their room, help with dishes, things like that. So it's still open-ended and it's still functional. But I think as we give them the ideas of open-ended play that they can do in their home, or in the classroom, for instance, that they will facilitate that play. Next slide, please. All right, so realizing that as a parent or as a teacher, you are often responsible for setting limits and following through for your child's own benefits, right? So you're asking, how do I encourage this unstructured play? So I want to start by saying you're going to have to set some limits to create this. So as a parent, you know, if a child came to you and you're cooking dinner and they say, give me a cookie, I want a cookie, would you give it to them? I'm going to guess that no, you would say, dinner will be ready in 5 minutes. So that's your limit, right? That's your boundary. You set it and you stick to it. Same thing with if you're putting them to bed and you're about to read them their story, you say, I love you, good night. And they say, let's go outside and play. You're probably going to say, no, this isn't the right time to play. It's time to sleep. So teaching your child any new limit, no matter what it might be, will probably give you a little bit of pushback at first. But just like any limit we set, we're doing it for our child's own benefit and safety and learning. So I want to start by saying that you would encourage your little reluctant child, classroom or at home, by setting a clear and specific limit in a statement form. So you could say, I'm going to get a cup of coffee, or I'm going to go to the bathroom. Not, can I go get a cup of coffee? Can I go to the bathroom? Because they will probably answer you no. And then you might want to even add, I'll be back in 2 minutes. If your child protests, like they would with those other requests for a cookie or going outside, do what you would do in any of those scenarios. You're going to be confident, direct, and follow through on what you said. So each time you set this limit and follow through, it will become easier and easier. And eventually your child will understand the expectation, just as they do with other limits that you've set. So again, when your child asks you to play and you want to start this process of unstructured play, you're going to be clear and confident in your statement. I'm going to go fold the laundry. And this is even actually a really good one because it is visual as well. They see the basket of clothes. And once I'm done folding this laundry, then I'll come over and play with you. So you're giving them a very visual experience of knowing when that time might be that they come and join. You can also offer the choice if you'd like. You can play here next to me, or you can help me sort the clothes. And then you acknowledge some feelings. I know you want me to play with you. I can play with you after I fold this laundry. And then you just finally want to follow through with that. So you can also notice that you're probably going to be able to increase the time as they get more successful in this. So I think one of our questions that came in was related to that duration of time and ages as well. So of course, your younger children might need a little bit more support in the beginning than your older children. But as they get older and as they become more experienced in this unstructured play and in engaging in play on their own, that duration of time will lengthen. And then one final note is if you're having difficulties separating inside your home as a parent, the playground is actually a really great place to start this process of pulling away from the play. Of course, again, you're going to be observing from a safe distance. So if your child needs help climbing, you want to still be there, but you're not going to be engaging in the play with them. So when they're outside, they just naturally want to go out and explore the world. So this is a good place to start the process of unstructured play and pulling back as a parent in terms of co-playing with them. All right, next slide, please. All right, so you have your environment set up with open-ended toys, and you have your routine set up, and you have your script for how you're going to start this play. So now we're going to talk about ways to support the unstructured play. So some general tips include that you want to just wait to be invited into the play. If your child is happily playing, it's fine to leave them to it and just watch them. Secondly, you want to preserve the space and quiet. And what I mean by that is to help protect your child from interruptions. So if they're absorbed in their play, avoid switching on the TV, avoid maybe pulling out your phone, because if you pull out your phone, they might run over to see what you're doing. Avoid asking questions or asking them to stop to do other activities. I know as a parent, sometimes I have to pause and check if it's a time that I can ask them to, for instance, potty training, go to the bathroom. Wait a moment, wait for their play to take a pause, and then that's your moment to engage. So we don't want to be interrupting their play. You also want to let your child explore and make mistakes. So this means using trial and error and their own ideas without feeling foolish or judged. So for instance, they're building with blocks and it just keeps falling down and falling down. I know sometimes it's hard. We want to go and engage with them. We want to show them how to make that block creation stable. But this is an opportunity for them to experience that. And going back to that Piaget quote that Sahar brought to us, this is their opportunity to explore and figure it out. If we just show them, they're going to think that this is the only way that I know how to build this creation. So giving them a safe space to make those mistakes. Let your child develop skills at their own pace. So I know it's tempting to step in to help your child when, again, you see that it's something difficult for them, but this is their opportunity to learn. So playing is learning. And then finally, let children choose the themes of their game. So even if the themes seem difficult or upset, it's their play. So we're going to talk about this a little bit later because I do think it's a topic that is important. But play is a way of processing events that are occurring in their life. And I know Sahar also mentioned this. So you might be wondering how you know if you should join your child's play. So thank you, Sahar. So first, you're going to pause before you get involved in your child's play, and you're going to look and listen to what is happening. And then you're going to ask yourself, oops, can you go back for me? Do I need to join for safety reasons? Then you're going to ask, what would happen if I suddenly joined? And then you're going to decide whether to act or not. After you've paused, you've looked, listened, thought, you'll have a better idea of whether you know if your child wants you to join or not. They might look over at you and smile. They might hand you a toy. This is their way of inviting you to their play. If they are staying focused, maybe this is an opportunity for you to sit back and observe. And I know as teachers, this is a beautiful moment to sit down and observe and to take some anecdotal notes in terms of how they are playing, how they are learning. And then finally, you're going to reflect. And afterwards, you're going to think about your involvement. Could it have changed their play? Did it stop them from playing? Did I make it more fun? Did it reassure them? So what was the purpose of you joining their play? And then how did it and the end result turn out? Next slide, please. Okay, so you want to participate in your child's play. I like to play with my kids, is what some parents are going to say, some teachers are going to say. I want to be on the carpet with them. I don't just want to observe them. I get it. I totally understand that. But I want you to also know that just being with your child is enough for them. And that's the same for teachers, parents, wherever. Sitting on the floor with them and mimicking their play shows that you enjoy being with them without them having to kind of entertain you. So one way to ensure that you're not inadvertently guiding the play verbally as you interact with your child is something that we would call sports casting. And this is exactly what it sounds like for those that like to watch sports. Announcers talk about what's happening in the game, and they're simply telling you exactly what's happening as it is happening without any emotional connection to the information. So in your child's play, it might sound something like this. Sammy, you're playing with the trucks. You put the fire truck in the front, then the dump truck, and now you're bringing over the trash truck. So notice that I did not add any plan to my sports casting, such as, are you going to make the trucks crash? Where are you going to park all the trucks? Because this would then guide the play, and it might not be the place that the child wants to take it. So you can play with your child. I want you to know that. It's okay to also give them independent time, follow their guide and their lead. Because in play, they should be the boss. Go ahead and click for me, Sahar. Thank you. You're also going to avoid quizzing your child during play by asking what questions, like what color is this? What shape is this? Instead, I want you to think about using why and how questions. So these are open-ended questions that allow your child to think about the answer that they want to give. So think about how it might block play if you were doing the quiz questions versus if you were saying things like, why did you put the rectangle block there? Or how did you make this creation stable? And then as educators, I think we often want to integrate academic concepts into the play. And I would recommend that you can use this still in sports casting. So going back to the truck example, you could add ordinal numbers by saying, you put the fire truck first, the dump truck second, and the trash truck third. So I'm still sportscasting. I'm leaving my emotions out of it, but I'm adding those ordinal numbers into it, which is a kindergarten scale that they're going to be learning there. So these are some pre-academic skills that we would be using in our language. You could also say, you're stacking the blocks on top of each other. I see you put that one on the side. Or you could enhance this by saying, you put the rectangle block on the bottom, the square in the middle, and the triangle on top. I see you moved the triangle to the side. So again, there's no emotion, there's no planning. I'm literally just saying what is happening in the child's play. And you're going to know how to scaffold this for your children, whether in the classroom or at home. So if some of those ordinal numbers or shapes are not appropriate yet, then you don't have to use them at all. Next slide, please. Thank you. Circling back to allowing children to choose the themes of their game, it's been proven that children can use play to work through difficult emotions, get a sense of satisfaction or control, process what they're hearing, seeing, and feeling, and also to meet their sensory needs. So I know Sahar has also touched on this. And I want to just start by saying this is not just scary emotions or fearful things. For instance, a great example is when a child sticks a ball under their shirt and says, look, I'm pregnant, or look, mommy, there's a baby in my belly. Or if they're playing with a baby doll and they're feeding the baby with a bottle, and they're mimicking what's happening in their life at home to understand those changes, to process what's happening. So it's not always a scary thing. It's actually a beautiful thing to watch them play out what they're observing. But what might it look like if children have kind of like scary or confusing feelings? You can go ahead and click for me, Sahar. So being very noisy, for example, needing to shout, sing loudly, bash on drums, and hit things. Also taking frustration out on toys or objects. Sahar, you also mentioned this, punching pillows, throwing a teddy bear around. Next, destroying something they've made. For example, tearing up a picture or knocking down towers. I have seen this with my own children, classroom and home. Withdrawing into a small space, for instance, getting into a cardboard box. Oh, thank you. Also, risk-taking behaviors like jumping from the arm of the couch is where my kids love to do this. And finally, play fighting and rough and tumble play. So with their siblings, they like to kind of get into that wrestling, rough and tumble play as well. Next slide, please. So these were some of the questions and questions and requests from you all. I'll give you a moment to read some of these. So judging by these questions, you can tell that this is a very important topic to both educators and parents. So again, circling back, first and foremost, unstructured play is not unsupervised play. So you want to make sure that physically they are in a safe environment. And if they're participating in any dangerous behavior to either themselves or others, beyond the typical grabbing of a toy kind of exchange with little ones, it's really important that an adult steps in. So in a class setting during unstructured play, it's important that an adult remain in close enough proximity to stop a physical altercation if you know that there's a student in your class that might lean that way. In your home, if you also see some of these tendencies, you're going to want to stay closer to them than you might with other children. In terms of the strong emotions, including anxiety or other mental health issues, I would refer back to that ways to support play and responding to play that we discussed, beginning by asking, do I need to interrupt this play for safety reasons? So you're going to pause before you get involved, look and listen to what is happening, and decide whether to act. If the play is not physically harmful, but it involves maybe a tricky topic, I want you to continue to just look and listen. So if it feels appropriate to play to joy, you can ask open-ended questions like why and how to understand their thinking. But again, sometimes that play is just a form of processing that is cathartic for the child, and it might feel uncomfortable for the adult. So for instance, I had a child when I was teaching whose mother was very, very ill, and she was only 3 at the time. And so in her play, I would see some of this come up. It was uncomfortable for me as the teacher to observe. I felt, the emotions of it. For her, it was very normal and she needed to play it out. So I want to just start by saying, like, it might feel uncomfortable to you to observe some of this, but it might be really appropriate for them. For teachers and parents, another option for non-physical dangerous play is to wait until the play finishes, and later in a calm moment with the children or with your child at home, recall and recognize the play with them using your sportscasting and your open-ended questions. So this is kind of like that question about in the classroom when you were talking about supporting those kindergartners. So the conversation could look like this. I noticed that when you were playing today, you created a big castle with blocks. Then I heard your voice get loud and I saw you hit the blocks with a fist. Can you tell me more about that? So notice I didn't add any kind of language that might say, I saw you get mad, because he may not have gotten mad. He just got loud and hit them. Maybe it was part of destruction, just wanted to play in that kind of construction play. So really be careful about how you use your language. And then from there, as you ask that, can you tell me more question, you'll be able to decipher what their play meant and then proceed from there. And then finally, some play that we might deem as risky by an adult could be very well developmentally appropriate. And also could be maybe sensory seeking for children. So for instance, jumping from the 4th stair in my house is like so fun, terrifying for me as a mother, but they really need sometimes to get that physical activity out. Another example outside, climbing a high tree, risky behavior. As long as I'm physically close to them, they will be okay. Climbing up the stair railing also might be some need to get out some gross motor activity. Jumping off the arm of the couch. Again, these are all could be dangerous, but could also be sensory seeking and appropriate. So you also need to kind of think through, how can I make some of these risky behaviors, we're going to call them, still appropriate and safe in my house? Put some pillows down on the floor or create an opportunity for them to engage in this play by creating an obstacle course throughout the house. Another example is, like I think we mentioned in the last slide, being in a close quarters. Some of the kids like to be in a tent kind of situation. So could I put a blanket over our dining room table and let them play under there so they feel this kind of sense of tightness and darkness and safety? So you're going to be finding that there might be some sensory seeking needs. And this is where the part 2 will come in next week, because we have our wonderful early childhood coordinator, Amber Gant, who has a very strong background in this, who will be touching more on those sensory needs of children and how to incorporate their sensory needs into their play. So next slide, please, Sahar. So we will get to questions. I just want to make our plug for next week in terms of registering for part 2 of our series. And next week, she will get more into those sensory needs, finding goodness of fit and your own temperament, and then creating an environment where all children can thrive. And with that, we will open the chat for some questions.
Okay, so we already had a couple in there, so let's get started. So how do you encourage independent play for an only child who has anxiety and needs to be with mom every second? This is an 8-year-old.
Okay, great question. So I think this starts by finding something that they are interested in. I'm going to guess your 8-year-old likes Legos or Minecraft or things like that. Finding something that's open-ended for them to play with. And I would, whether they're 8 or they're 4, I would use some of those same strategies. And it sounds like your child has anxiety and wants to be near you. So I would make sure that physically you are in close proximity to them, but you are not necessarily engaging in the play with them. Or if you are, you're using those sports castings. You're not guiding the play. So I would start by saying, I'm going to be right here next to you, but I need a moment to fold this laundry, or even another visual kind of representation of what you're going to be doing. So that could look like a timer. At 8 years old, they might be able to understand that timing. You know, if you have a little digital timer, the clock counting down. Of course, there are wonderful visual timers online that you can purchase as well. So I would really encourage you to start by being physically next to them during their play. And it's just going to start small. It's going to start with 1 minute of them playing on their own, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. And I would reward them by engaging in play afterwards with them. So if they've played for 3 minutes independently without needing you to interact, I would then reward them with some interaction, because it sounds like this is a child that really does enjoy being with you, and has a need to be with you as well.
Great, thank you. So what do we do when our children ask for help?
Great question. And it's totally appropriate for them to ask for help. I think, first of all, you want to kind of encourage them to see if they can do it. It depends on what the item is or the task is that they're asking for help with. So I would encourage them first by saying, do you think you could try it? And then they'll usually try, like, for instance, I'm imagining it's something like opening an item. Do you think you can try it? Is there another way you could do that? Okay, yes, now I can help you. I'm not sure if there was more to that, but if you'd like to enter in the chat if there's anything else. I just think opening it with you try again, and then I can help you is a great way.
Jackie, just to also add a little bit to that, help seeking is such an important skill to instill in our children, not just in the early ages, but also like into adulthood as well. And this really ties into the idea of supporting their mental health, knowing that, they built that trust and that relationship with their caregivers, with the adults around them, that if they are feeling those big feelings, whatever that may be, that they are comfortable enough to go out and seek that help for themselves.
That's a great point, Sahar. Thank you for adding that. So I think getting them to try first shows some perseverance, and then also the ability to ask for help is something that we as adults should carry over. So I think that's a great way to answer that question.
Okay, so we're still looking for some more questions from our audience. Please, I know Jackie and Sahar would love to answer those. And just to let people know, part 2, if you go back out to the Parent Resource Center's website, you'll find registration available for part 2. I'm asking one of my staff to actually put the link to registration in the chat for those of you who maybe didn't sign up and realized, oh my goodness, I need to absolutely make sure that I can attend part 2. If you can't attend part 2, you can just sign up for the recorded link. We will record again next week. So please don't hesitate in registering because we want to make sure that you are getting what you need. All right, any other questions?
I'm also scrolling back and seeing someone did mention it's okay for kids to say they're bored. Yeah. It's normal feeling, don't need to fill the space. That is a great point. Thank you, Teresa, I believe, for saying that. And I like to say, and my kids don't like it, my older kids, but I like to say, when they say I'm bored, I say, well, you're about to come up with something really amazing because it does foster that. What am I going to do? So that is a great point. It's all right.
All right. Are there any resources available or do you have any recommendations to connect my 3-year-old with other kids her age? And this is a family who is kind of new to the area and, not quite sure perhaps. So any recommendations from you all?
Yeah, great question, Megan. I have been in a similar situation as you. I have a 3-year-old as of today. It's her birthday. And she doesn't go to a child care center, so she also doesn't have an opportunity really to play with other kids her own age. Obviously, she has older and younger siblings. So things that I like to do with her are take her to the free library programs. I know Fairfax County has a very strong library program, and I believe most of them are now back in person. So I really recommend going to those. I also recommend going to a playground with her. And don't be scared to kind of get involved at the playground and to say to other parents, hey, I see, how old is your child? And maybe start making connections, because especially if it's a local neighborhood playground, you could say, do you want to start meeting here at 10 o'clock on nice days or whatever? Someone in the chat also said to join the Facebook groups in the area. Great idea. There's lots of moms of insert city. So moms of Fairfax, moms of Vienna, wherever you are, enter those. And there are usually people that want to meet up and are in a very similar boat as you are, Megan.
And please do also, we'd love to have you reach out to the Parent Resource Center if you're looking for anything else. We do have lots of resources that we can connect you to in the community as well. So please do reach out to us. We'd love to chat with you about it. All right. Any other questions from our audience? I'll give everybody another minute or so. What do I do when she only wants to be pushed on the swings at the park? And I know I've had other families ask, our children or our child wants me to continuously play with them at the park. They don't want to maybe do things on their own. How do we just continue to encourage them to do things on their own?
Well, first of all, she might like the swings because, again, it could be sensory. And I think Amber will touch on this next week because it is a fun feeling to swing back and forth. It's also engaging with you. I think you could, again, set those limits. I'm going to push you 3 times and then I'm going to watch you swing and sort of start pulling back. First of all, that's like step 1 in terms of pulling back from that. And then also, it's very similar to some of the other strategies I gave you. So let's say she loves the swings, and that's fine if she just wants to do the swings. You could maybe encourage her to try some of the swings on her own by putting her belly on the swing and kind of going like a superhero swing, which would require her to do that rather than you would not be pushing the swing. Also then, if there's like a sandbox or a playground, climbing equipment, I would encourage her to do that and just sportscast it, because that is a way to them of you engaging, but it's also a way that you are engaging that's not leading their play. Sahar, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you touched up on all that I was thinking.
And another question, can you all talk more about doing rewards or having rewards for kids with kids? So example, for playing on their own or doing unstructured play, is there an opportunity for rewards? Would you recommend that?
Okay, so I'm not exactly sure. When you say rewards, I want to steer people away from a reward such as like a tangible reward, things like treats, screen time. I think typically when we think rewards, that's where our brains go. So I think a reward for them playing on their own, it depends on your child, but a reward could look like time, personal time with mom or personal time with dad in an activity that's important to them. So for instance, reading a book together, doing Play-Doh together, cooking together is a wonderful, beautiful experience with your children. I know it's testing as a parent, but it is truly a wonderful connective moment with children. Also building Legos. And I think sometimes as parents, we may not want to, there are things that I don't love to do. I don't love to play Legos. I love to do Play-Doh, but for my sons, their love language from me would be to sit down on the carpet with them and play Legos. So I think thinking of it as a reward that's personal and connective with your child is really important. I hope that I answered that.
Okay. And I will have to say, I have to reinforce the cooking thing, Jackie. I had my daughter in the kitchen with me probably since she's been 2. And she showed interest, and she stood on a chair next to me or next to her dad in the kitchen. And she's now almost 24 and cooks for herself all the time. So besides it being such a great experience, it taught a very valuable life skill.
Totally agree. Yes, it's wonderful. It's the cleanup. It can be bad
Right.
when
True
you're
enough.
cooking with little ones. But those are, again, those are one of those experiences that are just so beautiful for them. Someone in the chat just put magic sand. Teresa, I totally agree. My kids love magic sand, and it's one of those things that I have to just clean when they're done, because it bothers me to have it all over the floor, but it's important to them. So I think, again, Amber will touch on some of this messy play, but messy play is so important for our kids. And I know it's uncomfortable for us as parents, but we have to just continue on with that messy play.
All right. Well, again, Jackie and Sahar, thank you so much for your time this morning, for this incredible and valuable information. And we look forward to part 2 next week. And we thank everyone for joining us today. We wish you a very happy Friday and a wonderful weekend. And we look forward to seeing you all next week. Thank you.